me a little bit about yourself and your connection to Tecla.
Well, uh, I've been paralyzed. I'm a C2 quadriplegic. Been paralyzed for about 8 years now. I, my name is Ian Mackay. I probably should say that first. Anyway, I broke my neck riding my bicycle home from college in 2008. Was going kind of fast, and I hit some sand and lost control and went into a tree, and and suffered a spinal cord injury. And then that was in Santa Cruz, California. And I then moved to Washington. I currently live in Port Angeles, Washington. The first few years after I was injured, I really was a shut-in and didn't get out a lot. Didn't quite see how my life was going to move forward with paralysis. I mean, it was definitely hard, a dark time. But about, I don't know, 3 years ago, my friend Todd and I were really trying to find a good system for telephones, for cell phones that we could use, and we had tried a few options, but then we kind of stumbled across Tecla, and and that really opened up my world for me. It allowed me to use my phone, which allowed me to get outside and not have to have a caregiver right next to me or a family member right next to me at all times. And I was very, I really was interested in cycling, and I love the outdoors. I was a biology major in college, and birding has been a passion of mine. And so being able to get outside and kind of relive those interests kind of opened my eyes to what my life could become, paralyzed. But that was very, the big step there was having a telephony system that allowed me to call for help if I needed it. Being a C2, C3 quad, I have a partially paralyzed diaphragm, so I can't cough, and I'm slightly compromised in the respiratory system, and so I need to have people around if I start to get congested in my chest. And Tekla really allowed me to access my phone and allowed me to access the outdoors.
Right. So with Tecla, I mean, you still need people around and people will be helping you, but do you find you have a greater level of independence? And then when you do need help, you can just more easily call for it? Or how do you find the balance there?
Yeah. Well, so back to what my passion was, being outside. I live right next to a very cool trail system, and the independence it allows me to be able to get out and explore that. And yes, I need help, but as long as I have someone on call at home, they can just come on down and help me out. I mean, I may be 5, 10 miles away from home, but they can run over there in a car and and help me out. So yeah, I mean, it's just giving me a confidence, a confidence that I can get in touch with someone, but also not have to have them right next to me, and then kind of make my own decisions and the freedom to explore.
Right. Makes sense. You had mentioned Todd briefly. How did you and Todd come to meet?
Yeah, Todd, he's a good man. So when I was first hurt and I moved up to Washington, there was one of the doctors that I had spoken to, a physiatrist, recommended that I meet some other quads, and Todd was on that top of that list. He's he's well known here in northwestern Washington. He's the quad father, we call him, and he actually made a point to really get in touch with my mom at a time when I didn't want to talk to anyone, and so he reached out to my family, and he then came up to my house and visited. And at the time, I was ventilator dependent and I couldn't speak real well, but I kind of got to see how someone with a spinal cord injury who has adjusted to life lives, and he was successful and he was happy and he was charming, and that was, I think, one of the first steps to me getting out of my funk, and seeing someone that was doing well in the paralyzed world. So yeah, he lived nearby, within 100 miles, and came up and visited me. Once I did begin speaking, after I was off the ventilator, we got in contact, and he's been kind of my best friend since. We talk very regularly, and he's a great person to tackle the obstacles of paralysis with.
Mm-hmm.
He is on the frontier of trying to stay current with with technology that helps us out.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So it was Todd who connected us, I believe. And it was really to do with the ride that you organized this past summer. And that's what I wanted to ask you a little bit about. If you could tell me about your ride initiative and what that was all about.
Sure. Well, it kind of gets back to what we were saying, that one of my passions before I broke my neck was being outdoors, being on the trail, being a bicyclist. I had a really close friend that would bring me on bike tours across states. And once I became paralyzed, I kind of thought those experiences were gone, were obsolete for me. And I had done last year on the trails like 2,300 miles up here, and so I wanted to kind of have another challenge, and to kind of relive that heyday, I guess you could say, of um, of getting out and doing some cycling. And I I I kind of joked with my family. I was like, well, why don't I just go across the state? And that joke kind of became more, well, hey, it's possible, a little more realistic. And so Ian's ride was born, and we started mapping it out. One of the problems is that I don't have any income. I'm destitute, more or less, and so getting it paid for was going to be a hurdle. And so what I did was I kind of joined with a cause, mainly just uh, outdoor accessibility, because the trails are kind of what my medicine was, what really got me out there and living again. And so I was trying to advocate for more trails in our state, and just more accessible roads, and outdoors. I mean, I believe everyone should have access to that world, the outdoor world. So so with that, I was able to start fundraising, and I collected enough of money to get the ride off the ground, and set off to do about a 350-mile trek from north to south down to Portland. And I live up in Port Angeles, Washington, which is on the Olympic Peninsula. We took the ferry over to Canada, and then we I'm sorry, one second.
Okay.
My neighbor just got home. So we took the ferry to Canada. I rode about 20 miles in Canada to another ferry that brought me to mainland Washington, and then just headed south. And it was a great experience. But yeah, that's kind of where it all began,
Hmm.
where Ian's ride was born.
Cool. So that's where it started. And then you were able to get the fundraising together to make it happen. And how did it go? What resulted from the ride?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it got a lot more attention than I initially expected. I just kind of wanted to get out there and explore some new trails. I've done all the trails in my area, and it was exciting to get out there and see the rest of my state. I'm not a native Washingtonian, and so going 7 miles per hour slowly down our state sounded charming and really interesting. And so I did that. Besides the notoriety that came about, um, the people. I mean, meeting the people along the way that were so positive and encouraging. I mean, so many fist pumps out the window, and the people willing to buy us dinner and bring us cold Gatorade on the ride. It was really cool, and that was special. Um, I I was also able to really create, I think, a little bit of awareness too on the need for more accessibility I got to meet the governor after the ride was over, and talk to him about the need for accessible pathways and roadways in Washington State. I had interviews in numerous countries, and yeah, it turned out real well. The roads. I mean, I really would have liked to spend more times on very designated bike trails or bike lanes. Unfortunately, our infrastructure is not set up for that. So maybe 25% of the ride was on cool, isolated trails, and the rest was on highways and roadways. And and there were some challenges there where you don't have a shoulder and you have people driving really fast, and it's just not made for a power wheelchair to be traveling on.
Mm-hmm. So what were the numbers that resulted? How many days were you gone on the road? What was your fundraising like?
Okay, so I was able to raise about $11,000 total. So
Congrats.
the total cost, yeah, thank you. It cost about 6,000 for the whole trip. I had to have a bike crew with me because there were safety issues about being out on those highways. So I wanted at least two cyclists, kind of one in front of me and one behind me, to help make us very visible and noticeable. So yeah, it cost $6,000, and it also was the expenses of my crew, which means I was able to donate $5,000 to the cause I chose. That cause was mainly Washington Bikes, and so what they do is they lobby for more bike paths and trails in the state of Washington. So it's interesting how we aligned so well where with the bike community, and the bike community was also very valuable in helping me plan out the route. I was able to put together some suggested possible ideas for getting down to Portland, and and then just send them out there to the bike community, and they were able to look at them and say, okay, you do not want to do that. Here's a much better alternative, and that really helped out when we were on the road. Back to the numbers. I averaged, I think, about 30 miles a day. It was 11 days to get down there. Um, I did a 40-mile day, and I did some shorter, like 26 miles, but pretty much stayed right around the 30. What were the other numbers you were asking about there?
Those were the main ones. Your
Okay.
mileage, the days you're out, the money raised. So I think you covered
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And one other thing I guess I could mention is chairs. I mean, going that far, they don't really make power wheelchairs to go quite 40 miles, or at least not that I'm aware of. My chair will go about 30, and so what I did is I had to bring a second chair, and that was kind of how I dealt with the extra miles. Is I just did a chair swap midday and just kept going.
Hmm.
So
That's
we
a good
had
idea.
two chairs. I would do 4 umbrellas because there was a lot of heat. So I was trying to stay shaded. 340 miles, I think, total, 11 days.
Wow.
And maybe one more thing I should have mentioned in the previous question was uh, when I had done those bike tours in my able-bodied days, one of the really fun things was kind of visiting the breweries. Well, I really love craft beer, and that was something we incorporated into this ride. So that every night we tried to stop at a good local Washington brewery of near where we ended, and I got to sample a lot of cool Pacific Northwest brews.
That's awesome. Well, especially after all that, time out on the road, you have to reward yourself somehow too, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, exactly. So you had mentioned some cool surprises that had happened, like the people you'd met, the slight notoriety. Were there any unexpected challenges that you faced during your ride?
Yeah, I've already mentioned that the highways, the very narrow shouldered highways, if there was a shoulder at all, were certainly a challenge, and something I hadn't really planned for. I knew that could be a possibility, but some days when you were doing it for 20 miles, it was a little exhausting psychologically. You just get cars nonstop, the road noise, and they're coming so close, and so that was certainly a challenge. But by far the biggest challenge that I didn't expect, it just happened to be the hottest week of the year. And here in Washington, I mean, it's mainly a cooler weather state, and it was up in the high 90s, low 100s,
Mm.
and and that was difficult. And I used, like I mentioned earlier, umbrellas to try to stay shaded. Being a high quad, I can't regulate my temperature, so sweating in response to heat didn't it doesn't work for my body. So we used a spray bottle and tried to keep me misted down to create that evaporative cooling effect. But, but yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge. My body held up pretty well. The chairs held up pretty well. And overall, it went pretty smoothly.
Mm-hmm. So if anyone else were to want to try something like this or do like a 2-3 week long fundraising initiative,
Yeah.
do you have any tips or lessons learned from your experience?
I think the first thing I'd want to say there is, get out there and try. It's amazing what people will help you with, especially with fundraising, and if you're doing something you're passionate about, and that you really want to accomplish, people will get behind you, and you just have to reach out, and sometimes it's really hard to ask for help, but it's okay, and that was something that I had to kind of get over. But yeah, that was the one thing. Other than that, just as long as you plan it out, the logistics often can be the difficult part. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you got it well planned and well mapped out, it's all within reach. It's all doable, and particularly for the disabled community, we shouldn't allow our disability to limit us to things that we really want to do, even if it seems like this. I mean, basically, I went on a long bike tour. I'm in a power wheelchair. It seemed a little ridiculous, but hey, it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure happy I did it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Lastly, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or follow what you're up to, what's the best way to do so?
Okay, well, the easiest way is probably just through the blog, my website, which is just iansride.com, iansride.com. And yeah, my email is on there, and you can also keep up with what I'm doing. It's also looking like, I'm going to start a foundation after this. I didn't really plan on that, but I've had some people really encouraging me and requesting. So that website will be moving forward, and I'm sure there'll be more rides to come.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing with us your story. And yeah, I look forward to sharing it with the Tecla community.
Cool, Lisa. Well, thank you very much. It was nice chatting.